right. All right, we're live. Good evening, beautiful people. I am Ethan, aka Saints.WalterPicks, joined by my co-creator Shay, aka Lions.WalterPicks, here to talk about Thursday night football, Broncos versus Raiders. We were talking about it before we hopped on. If you had asked a couple weeks ago if we were excited to watch the Broncos and the Raiders duke it out, we probably would have said no, but now that Brock Bowers is back, Jacoby Myers has been traded, Pastor Tane's injured, there's a lot of storylines, I feel like, with tonight's game. One thing I was reading about beforehand, I was just looking at like the defensive matchups and the coverages and stuff like that. And one thing that was of pretty big note to me, at least, was when the man run rate of the Denver Broncos. So it dropped from 44.2% with Pastor Tane to 27.7% last week without Pastor Tane. So they're doing a lot more zone coverage than they were prior to. And of course, the biggest impact of that is one, Trey Tucker, but two, Brock Bowers. And I was looking up some Brock Bowers statistics, and obviously Brock Bowers is great no matter who he's up against, but he is slightly more efficient in zone coverage than he is in man coverage. So the defensive coverage that we're probably going to be seeing tonight is more favorable for a guy like Brock Bowers. So not that he would be a sit anyway on anyone's fantasy squads, but I think maybe my expectations for him are a little higher having some of that data behind me than maybe prior to.
Yeah, and I mean, we're looking at it, guys. On the Walter Picks app, by the way, you can look at fantasy points per route ran versus certain coverages. And on zone coverage, I mean, he's doing pretty good against zone coverage. Let's see the man coverage. I'm interested to see the difference. So he's averaging 0.4 fantasy points per route run against zone coverage. Against man coverage, he is averaging, let's see, boom, boom. He's averaging 0.9. So he's actually the tight end 2 in fantasy points per route run against man. Pretty interesting. I mean, what do you think? I'd say Brock Bowers. Let's do a little higher or lower. I'm going to say Bowers will see higher than 11.5 targets. What are we saying? I think higher tonight. Like without Jacoby Myers.
I think certainly so. Yeah, I think a couple of things. One, the Broncos defense is obviously still good without, Pastor Tane. They lead the league in sacks, but it's definitely a huge blow to the team losing a guy like that, because not only is he a dominant presence on the field, but I was also one of those locker room leaders, which I still expect him to be even when he's not playing. But it is a little bit of a blow to the morale when you lose a player like that. But one, I think that leads to Brock Bowers performing a little better, and kind of just the Raiders offense in general, who's been not that great this year. But the offensive side of the ball as well, I think we kind of both expect the Broncos to outplay the Raiders. I don't think that's probably anything anyone would disagree with offensively. And so the Raiders likely will be passing the ball. I would expect a little bit more than running the ball tonight. So I could see a handful of targets for Ashley Genty, but especially Brock Bowers. And like we talked about earlier with Jacoby Myers being out, guys like Trey Tucker and Brock Bowers both are going to get more targets. So I think 11.5 targets is probably a good line. And I think I'd probably go the over on that.
Yeah, for sure. And guys, if you think that Bowers is going to get higher than 11.5 targets, do a fire emoji. If you think lower than 11.5 targets, what emoji are we thinking, Ethan? Do the ice emoji. Do the ice emoji if you think lower than 11.5. Fire if you think higher. I feel like more than likely we got to go higher on that. Like it's Trey Tucker, it's Genty, it's Bowers. That is all that is offering in this offense. One storyline no one's talking about it. Jack Besh, I was a big fan of him coming out of college. I think this could be the night we see him finally get on the field. I do know his snap share has been increasing in the last couple weeks. If you play Dynasty, you probably have this guy in your taxi squad just waiting. But, I mean, yeah, he just has not had a role. But without Jacoby Myers, there should be some slot usage to go around. I'm excited to see Besh. Hey, maybe I called it, and maybe Jack Besh gets his first touchdown tonight. Who knows? But that's a storyline to watch, guys. See if he gets on the field.
Yeah, certainly for me as well. In the preseason, so I have a strategy when I go into drafts. I'll kind of leak the method here for a minute. But one of my biggest things to look at, and it's how I predicted a couple players in the past, like a Breece Hall, his rookie year being good. Dameon Pierce, although not a long relevancy in fantasy, did have a really good couple of weeks in his rookie years. I look at teams that are just really bad, really not that good, need a lot of help at any specific position, and drafted someone pretty highly in that position. And that seems a little bit obvious, but it works more often than it doesn't, especially when you're going to be spending 14 to 15 round picks on the guys, which they should all be flyers that you want with high upside, and so Jack Besh is one of those guys. You look at the Raiders team even in the preseason, honestly I expected a little bit more with Pete Carroll and Geno Smith reuniting. I figured they would be appreciate the comment, Rhythm Fantasy. But I expected a little bit more from the passing game in general between Geno and Pete Carroll reuniting. Geno Smith's best season ever was with Pete Carroll a few years ago in Seattle. But looking at that receiving core, there wasn't a lot of talent. Like, nothing against the players, but like if you start reading past like the wide receiver 2 or 3, you're going to be telling most people guys they've never heard of before. And so I thought a guy like Jack Besh, he was great in college, and going to a team with a Geno Smith Pete Carroll reunion, I thought was going to have a pretty good odds as a rookie of breaking out. And obviously it hasn't worked out that way. I think there's a lot you could, assign that to poor offensive line play. Bowers getting injured, Jacoby Myers has been battling an injury, and all those things affect everyone. But I think Jack Besh season could be in. I'm really hoping for it, man.
The one thing with it is that he really just got outplayed by Dante Thornton in training camp. And Dante Thornton had the skill set to get him on the field sooner. They needed that deep threat. They needed that speedster. And Jack Besh is literally the opposite of a deep threat speedster. He is like the opposite receiver to that. And they needed Dante Thornton. And so he kind of got that day one wide receiver 3 role. But yeah, I'm excited for that. I have seen Javier spamming this RJ Harvey question. What are you thinking about RJ Harvey tonight? I've seen some in the TikTok live as well. And guys, if you're in the TikTok live, come to the YouTube live. That's where we're answering all the questions. But RJ Harvey, that is a tough one for me because he's kind of the last 2 weeks, he's found the end zone in both of them. 2 weeks ago, he found the end zone, 3 times? Am I crazy? Wasn't it 3 times?
He had a couple of touches, but I think he scored 2 touchdowns last week.
Was it 2? Well, he scored 3 receiving and
I was thinking rushing. Yeah. Scrimmage, he had 3. Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, I think, as you can see, just on the points alone, obviously these last couple of weeks, he's getting a lot more. Scroll over to the snap share on RJ Harvey real quick. But obviously, like the biggest thing to look for when you're talking about any player is like participation more than anything. And you can see his snap percentage has gone up a little bit over the last couple of weeks, 31 and 27 respectively. Is it up from 24 and 20 and 18 that we've seen previously? Not like it's an insane amount right now, but I think that the usage that he gets in the receiving game is going to continue. I think that, especially after the first few weeks of the season where Geno Smith was number 1 in turnovers and was on pace to break Jameis Winston's 30 interception record, they started limiting him to more like dink and dunk short yardage plays. And I think RJ Harvey is perfect for that type of role. Certainly more so than J.K. Dobbins is, I think. J.K. Dobbins does get a couple targets here and there, but RJ Harvey's usage in the receiving game, I think, is what gives him the upside and maybe a little bit of a higher ceiling when it comes to fantasy value.
For sure. And look at these targets per route run numbers. Guys, if you're not using the advanced player profiles, what are you doing? Like me and Ethan, I can speak for myself. I know Ethan probably does it too. Like anytime I get a trade, anytime I'm thinking about trading for a guy, I look at all his usage stats. So for example, Harvey, he's been that receiving back. Like J.K. Dobbins has pretty much been null and void in the receiving game. It's been all RJ Harvey, and he has really good target per route run numbers. For example, last week, he was targeted on 38% of the routes he's running. That is insane. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a good amount of dump off passes tonight against the Raiders, because more than likely Max Crosby is going to be getting to Bo Nix early and often. So Bo Nix is going to have to dump down the ball to RJ Harvey, but it's tough, guys. What I would say, if let's say you're going into the week, you're playing one of the best teams in the league, you have a 40% chance to win, it may be worth starting RJ Harvey, because I do think there's a chance he gets a touchdown, he gets 4 or 5 catches, and he gets you a really good day. But however, if you have, let's say, a 55 to 60% chance to win, I think there's safer options. I'm interested to see where we have him in the weekly rankings.
Yeah, I agree with that too, especially this week. It's just part of the fantasy football season, but there's bye weeks that are starting to pile up for certain players that maybe didn't think about that during their draft. And so I get questions every week about, a couple of players you would never think would be, a starting running back or a starting wide receiver, but because of, bye week options, it's just what you're limited to. And I think RJ Harvey could be one of those guys that makes himself maybe a little bit relevant this week. He's a little bit more attractive to me than some of the others, maybe in a similar RB2 position, I think, just because the matchup is good. And 2, that the other thing too is even with the injuries to the defense of the Broncos and the Raiders, offense having Brock Bowers back, I still think this is a Broncos game to lose, right? It's the Broncos game, I think, it'd be start to finish. And so typically when that happens, it's when you want to get your rookies involved and see if they can be future cornerstones of the team. And so I think they still want to continue to work out RJ Harvey throughout the rest of the year and see if he can be that guy. Because J.K. Dobbins, he's not a young buck anymore. He's not, on the verge of retirement, but he's not going to be the next generational running back for the Broncos or anything that's going to be playing there for 6 or 7 years with Bo Nix. But RJ Harvey certainly has the potential to if he works out. And so I think in games like this, it's the perfect opportunity to try those things out and give RJ Harvey a few more carries than maybe he would on another week.
For sure, especially if they get up early and often, which I definitely think they can against this Raiders team. So this is a good one from just so me vids. Monungai or Harvey. So we have Monungai higher in our rankings. We have Monungai as our RB19 in the Walter Picks running back rankings for the week, and then RJ Harvey's down at RB28. So here's the thing. I want to see who has the higher boom percentage probability. The thing with Monungai, he's been limited in practice all week with an ankle injury. Swift just returned full practice, so more than likely Swift is playing this week. I'd say there's like a 95% chance he plays. The thing with this, Monungai limited, Harvey, we know he's going to have the receiving role. We know he pretty much has no floor. If we look here, he has a 47% bust probability. That means, like he has a 50% chance to go like under his fantasy points, and his fantasy point projection is only 9. So for me, that's a tough one though, because Monungai is banged up. Swift is coming back. It's a good matchup against the Giants, but me personally, we don't know if Monungai is going to play. I'd say it's probably 60-40. I might go Harvey. What do you think?
Yeah, it's always tough to make those decisions when someone's playing on Thursday Night Football, because I get questions about injuries all the time. And you know, I do my research, but there's only so much we can know about what goes on in that locker room. And so injuries like Monungai is tough, but especially when your alternative is playing on Thursday night where you don't get the benefit of making the decision at 12:30 on Sunday. So, you know, I would say when it comes to questions like that, it usually depends on who your other option would be. I mean, like if you have a third option that's not that much lower projections than RJ Harvey, then I would ride it out with Monungai, just because the upside I think he has compared to RJ Harvey is higher enough that I think it's worth the risk. But if those are your only two options. Let's say your next best guy is I can't even think of like you know, just any team's RB3 or RB4 that you might get 3 carries a game. Then I think RJ Harvey's worth it, just because at least you know he's going to be playing. You know he's going to get some targets. He may not, you know, take off and get, you know, 20-point upside like Monungai might, just because of the defensive matchup. But I kind of feel the same way. Like RJ Harvey's probably the better bet, factoring in the injury. But, you know, it's also one of those things too, where it depends on the situation you're in. I mean, are you in a must-win week where like you're liable to miss the playoffs if you lose again? Because in that case, you do need to play it a little safer. You don't want to take the risk on somebody who doesn't play, and then you're guaranteeing yourself a loss, right? But if you're, you know, let's say you're guaranteed to make the playoffs, but you're going for seeding, you want to get a little bit of higher spots. You want to have the points tiebreaker, and maybe go with the guy who has a little more upside, but a little bit higher risk. Because worst case, you still make the playoffs, but you're 1 seed lower. Maybe you don't get to bye or whatever it may be. But those are always things to consider as well. I think between either one of us, whenever we give out any start sit questions or advice, is, you know, there's a general rule and a general consensus answer, but a lot of it does depend on your circumstances and where you're at. But I think that's a good one though. RJ Harvey versus Kyle Monungai, I think is a good question for this week.
I think we're leaning Harvey, but that's a tough one. I just think if it's a must-win week for you, I think you have to go Harvey just because of the risk of Monungai missing. We don't know what his workload is going to look like with Swift back. I think you go Harvey, especially if it's a PPR league. And then this question, Bo Nix, Jared Goff. I like this a lot. Me personally, I'm going Bo Nix. If we look at his game log, he's a QB7 on the year, and he's really been heating up over the last 3 weeks. 40, 25, and then 19 last week. In a game he did not play that well against the Texans, he still got you 19 fantasy points. And it's because he's getting over 2 passing touchdowns in each of the last 3 weeks. This one, I know Goff has a great matchup. I know the Commanders are super banged up. Their secondary has not been great this year. I'm still leaning Bo Nix. I think he offers you more rushing upside. He has a good matchup tonight. Really, the only thing that could go extremely wrong in this matchup where Bo Nix does not hit at least projection is that the Raiders come out, they are terrible, and the Broncos get up by 2-3 scores in the first half, and then you're looking at them just running the ball a ton. So I'm leaning Bo Nix, though. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to say the same thing. I mean, going back to his points over the last couple of weeks, 19 points or 19.5 or 20 points being his lowest recently against the number one defense that has allowed the least points in the entire NFL to QBs, I think is pretty good. I mean, 20. If you're going to tell me that, you know, if I had a QB playing against the Texans right now and you told me they're going to score 20 points, I would take my chances on that. I mean, that's a really good score. And to your point, I think that it being a Thursday night game, it's divisional. I would go Bo Nix as well. I think that they're both in circumstances, both Goff and Nix, where I think they're both liable to run the ball out and maybe not get benched necessarily, but if it gets to that point, maybe. But you got to think about the Washington Commanders right now. I would have high hopes for going into the season, like I think most people did, but just with their injuries, they're probably a bottom 8 team in the NFL right now just because of the injuries. And so I think that the Lions are probably just as likely to get up early on the Commanders as Bo Nix is to get up on the Raiders. So I would definitely go Bo Nix. I think you've got much more upside with him. He kind of feels more of like the captain of his offense than Jared Goff does, if that makes sense. Jared Goff, listen, I'm one of those Jared Goff glazers. Like I'm not one that says he's a system guy and he's only a product because of the guys he has around him. But Jared Goff does have a lot of talent around him, and they get the ball a lot. Like Amon-Ra has some passing touchdowns. David Montgomery gets some passing touchdowns. Bo Nix is in a system where it feels like he's the captain of the ship more so. And if there's going to be touchdowns being scored, it's going to go through him more often than it'll go through Goff on the Lions.
I agree. It's almost like, okay, Jared Goff can have a very subpar game or play really poorly. We saw last year he threw, 5 interceptions against the Texans, and the Lions still pulled out the win, and there were still plenty of fantasy points to go around. Bo Nix, on the other hand, if Bo Nix plays poorly, the Broncos, I think, more than likely are not going to win that football game. I know they still have a top 5 defense, but offense-wise, I agree with you. It kind of runs through Bo Nix, and he has to have a good game to win football games. But let's look at this question. Need help? Start 2. Genty, Dobbins, Kenneth Walker, Swift. This one is tough for me. I like Genty. I think you have to start Genty even with the bad matchup. I think he's by far the most talented out of those 4 running backs. We've seen him get more involved in the receiving game over the last couple of weeks. Think I got to go Genty, and then after that, I'm interested, Ethan. What do you think? Or you're thinking Genty though, right?
Yeah, probably out of that lot. I'm not as big on Genty as a lot of other people are, but I do think out of that batch, Ken Walker's really hard for me to ever recommend starting just because Charbonnet takes so many red zone touches. I was talking about it last week, but Charbonnet's top 5 in red zone touch percentage and goal line carry percentage. He's top 5 in both, top 3 in one of them. So Kenneth Walker is just a little bit too unreliable for me. He has a high upside, but I don't ever really want to start him when I've got other options. And Genty's probably attractive for me compared to the other guys, but I think Swift is probably my number 1 on that list. We were talking about the Monangai injury earlier. Whether Monangai plays or not, I think if Swift is fully healthy, he's going to be the RB1. He's going to get the majority of the carries, even if it's 60-40. And playing against the second worst run defense in the league, they've allowed the second most points to running backs the Giants have. I think Swift is a must start, especially with the Kyle Monangai injury, where even if Monangai does play, maybe it's limited capacity. Maybe he gets a smaller share of snaps than he has been in previous weeks. And you also got to think about the fact that the Bears are in the playoff hunt right now. They need to win every week. The Giants are kind of getting to that point in the season where they're starting to teeter on eliminated. Obviously, they're not technically eliminated, but it's kind of the morale perspective of like, okay, once you have 8-9 losses, you're mentally checked out, right? And so I think that the Bears are going to be more in it to win it. I hate using that type of terminology, but I feel like a guy like Swift is liable to get more carries and be playing at full capacity all game than maybe a Dobbins or a Ken Walker.
Yeah, and the Walter Picks app agrees with you on that with going Swift and Genty, and I agree with you too. Monangai playing in a limited capacity, maybe even missing. I think you have to go Swift, and then Genty just because of the upside he offers. I think Genty's night tonight is all up to game script. If the Raiders can keep this thing even semi-close, which it's a primetime game, it's a divisional matchup. Divisional matchups are a lot harder to predict than just a normal 12 p.m. slate game or a 1 p.m. slate game. So for me, I think there is a chance the Raiders could keep it close, especially without one of the Broncos' best players, PS2. So if the game stays close, I think Genty could easily be a top 10 running back this week. It's just about game script.
And one thing about that as well, just going back to the Denver defense, like you can see they're the fifth best against running backs this season so far. And with the Pastor Tan injury, on a surface level, that means, okay, well, the Raiders should be more efficient in the passing game, right? But you also got to think about being effective in the passing game opens up the run game for guys like Ashton Genty. If they can get a couple dink and dunk chunk yard, 8-9 yard plays in the passing game, that's going to open it up for Ashton Genty because they might have to drop back a little more than they were because they're just giving up too many first downs, which means they're not going to load the box against Genty. Maybe Genty's able to get a couple more yards per carry than he was prior to. So I like that as well. And then on top of it being a divisional matchup, which like you said, is much harder to predict than your average 12 p.m. slate game, it's also a Thursday night game, which, there's a small minority of people that thinks we shouldn't have Thursday night games because of how they, end up of being so unpredictable. Sometimes they're really bad snooze fests. Sometimes they're the opposite, but that plays into the unpredictability factor of it as well. And I think that works in Genty's favor because the stats aren't positive for him, I'll say. Like, he hasn't been as great coming out of college as a lot of people thought he was going to be. The O-line is not that great, and Denver's defense has allowed less points to running backs than most of the teams in the league. But everything that we were just talking about with PS2 being out, it's Thursday night, it's divisional, Genty's kind of been heating up lately. He's been getting some work in the receiving game too, which is positive. I think that all of the let's say non-statistical factors out there, all that kind of stuff, I think leads to me wanting to believe that Genty's going to have a pretty good game this week.
Yeah, I agree. It's almost like a feeling thing. Like sometimes, it's not terrible matchup, but I mean, I see a world where the Raiders can keep this close. So I think in that world, Genti has a good game. And then this question, I feel bad for you, brother. RJ Harvey or Luke Musgrave? Me personally, I feel pretty strongly that Luke Musgrave is going to have a role really right away in this offense with the loss of Tucker Kraft. Luke Musgrave, let's go to the game log. I just remember him being very solid his rookie year. I believe him and Kraft were drafted the same year. Musgrave actually higher. He was very solid before he kind of got his job stolen by Kraft because he got hurt. I mean, he was putting up very decent numbers, and I think we could see Luke Musgrave be a low end tight end 1, high end tight end 2, and a decent flex play depending on matchup week to week. Me personally, I'm pretty comfortable going Luke Musgrave out of the two. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the same thing. The other thing you got to consider as well when looking at Luke Musgrave's stats from a couple of years ago, the Packers are a better team now than they were then. And I said the same thing that you just did about Luke Musgrave, where he was pretty talented his rookie year. The times he's gotten opportunities in Tucker Kraft's absence, he's played pretty well. He doesn't quite have the upside maybe as Tucker Kraft, but Kraft's upside is 40 points, so you can't really
Yeah.
expect that from a tight end too. But I definitely think he has 20, 25 point upside at his best. And especially this week, matchup against the Eagles, who you can look at the numbers, they don't allow many points to tight ends, but I think that this is a potential number one seed in the NFC game right here. The winner of this game, I'd say, probably over 50% chance that it's one of these two teams this year. They're two of the best teams. And so I think that both teams are going to be playing their best football for all 60 minutes. I think the Packers are going to be passing the ball quite a bit. And I think the guy like Luke Musgrave is liable to get a lot of targets in Tucker Kraft's absence. So I do like him this week.
I agree. Okay, so this question, you would think if someone asked me week 1 that we were going or someone told me week 1 that we were going to be deciding between 7th round or 5th round rookie tight end Aronda Gatson or Courtland Sutton, I would think you're crazy. And I would think you're even crazier because I'm going to say Aronda Gatson pretty comfortably.
Yeah. So listen, I've got a few players that that I hitch my wagon to every season when they pop off. Like I'm pretty critical of like 1 week wonders. Like a player will pop off 1 week and then on Monday everyone says add him on waivers. I'm pretty cautious before doing that most weeks because I've been burned by it in the past. I've been playing fantasy football long enough that I've done it and I've lost weeks because of it. But Aronda Gatson was one of the guys that I didn't question it at all. If you pull up Aronda Gatson's stats real quick and just look at his volume,
Yeah.
like he's getting all of the tight end routes for the team. And this is all after the first week of him playing. This is what I was telling everyone. And I was getting poo-pooed on in my chat a little bit for being so high on him. But the snap percentage, the route run percentage, 100% of the tight end routes going to him, every single metric you can quantify about should this guy be a success or not, pointed to yes for Aronda Gatson. Every single one of them. And so in my two primary leagues, I had Jake Ferguson in one and Trey McBride in the other. And I put my number one waiver claim in on Aronda Gatson in both. And because my league mates weren't high on him, I ended up picking him up in both. And so I played him in the flex 1 week and he produced super well. And then I flipped him just this last week for Justin Jefferson, which is incredible because he's got a great playoff schedule. So I've got Trey McBride, Justin Jefferson, and JSN on my squad, which is crazy. Really heating up for the playoffs. But to my point, I don't want to sit here and glaze Gatson too much. But yeah, I'm going Gatson over a lot of guys this week. Like I feel like he's entering that tier of tight ends where you can reasonably start him in flex over decent, like high wide receiver 2, low wide receiver 1 type guys. Typically, tight ends are only going to play in the tight end spot because there's not enough of them to fill a tight end and a flex spot. But I think he's entering that tier, especially because he was a waiver pickup where he is viable to start in your flex spot a lot of weeks.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think he's just getting so many, like, look at his target numbers. The last 2 weeks, only 5 targets, but still, I mean, the game script was definitely against him in both of those. He's just getting you a really safe floor, even if he doesn't get in the end zone, where I don't think you can say the same about Courtland Sutton. Now, we could completely be wrong about this. Maybe Courtland Sutton gets in the end zone twice. I definitely think that's a possibility. I think he is one of the best red zone receivers in the NFL currently. But I like to start guys who don't need to get in the end zone to have a good day. And I think one of those people is Aronda Gatson. I don't think we can say the same about Sutton. I think he has to get in the end zone to get a better fantasy day than Gatson this week.
And you look at his matchups too coming up the next couple of weeks. He's got the second and the third worst defenses against tight ends in the next 2 weeks. So in Pittsburgh and Jacksonville, and you can see what he's done against similar teams, Miami and Indianapolis being just behind him. And I mean, look how he put up great points against Minnesota as well. And Tennessee wasn't bad, That game sure kind of fell apart. It felt like in the first 5 minutes with that pick 6, but he still put up a decent amount of points for for the young tight end. And I think this week against the Steelers, where once again, this has playoff implications. These are probably going to be two wild card teams, maybe the 6, 7, 8 seed, something like that in the AFC. And so I think that it's another one of those games where they're going to be playing their best all game. I don't think even if one of them gets up, they're going to be resting their starters unless it's like a 5-score lead or something. So I see Gatson getting reps and snaps and targets start to finish in their game this Sunday.
I completely agree. Okay, so we got this one. Courtland Sutton, Troy Franklin, and Stephon Diggs. I know we were literally just kind of putting Courtland Sutton down, saying he's going to have to get in the end zone and have a good day. All of those things. I am still going Courtland Sutton here. I think if he's going to get in the end zone, this is the best matchup to do it. Vegas have been awful against receivers. I think Courtland Sutton has a great matchup, and I think I'm going him pretty comfortably over Franklin, who is out targeting Sutton over the last 4 weeks. Still going Sutton and pretty comfortably over Diggs.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you there. I would start Courtland Sutton or Troy Franklin over Diggs, but I'm going to lean Sutton over Troy Franklin as well. It's been kind of week to week which guy gets the lion's share, but it's been Courtland Sutton more often than it's been Troy Franklin since the start of the season. And so at this point, if I'm going to lean one way or the other, I've got to go Courtland Sutton. He's such a talented receiver too. I mean, he's one of those guys where I'm not concerned about, is he going to turn these targets into points? There are some guys like Brian Thomas Jr., for example, who's getting 12 targets a game early on, but he'd only turn that into 4 or 5 points, right? But a guy like Courtland Sutton is going to turn targets to points. And so I know he's going to get a few tonight. And as long as the game script calls for it, I know he's going to be a little bit safer to convert on those and turn them into some good scores.
100%. And so this one is insane. I think you should be starting both of them. Bowers or Gadsden is crazy. I don't know. Your team must be stacked if you can't start both of these guys. I'm still going to go Bowers. He just had 18 targets or something insane like that. How many targets did Bowers have last week? He only had 13, but he had 12 catches, 127 yards, 3 touchdowns. I think you have to go Brock Bowers, especially with the loss of Jacoby Myers. But I think these guys should both be must starts. Like, you should start one of these guys in the flex, Ryan. But yeah, what do you think? I mean, that's like a toss up, really.
Yeah, I'm going to say the same thing. I think that their floors are probably pretty comfortably similar at the moment, but I think Bowers definitely has a higher ceiling, as evidenced by last week when he scored 40 points. He has less competition for targets, so I'm definitely going to lean Bowers over Gatson. But I also agree with you on that you should be starting both, unless you just have, like Shay said, a stacked roster and you've got a really high end wide receiver or running back one in that flex spot that you can't afford to leave on the bench, then I would go Gatson over most guys. Like, I would go Gatson over a guy like Sutton or a guy like Ladd McConkey, to be honest, in my flex spot this week. Ladd might be close, but I would still, I think, lean Gatson over a lot of those kind of like mid-tier wide receiver, like kind of your bridge between wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2s, and same thing with your running backs. I think I would start Gatson over a lot of those this week.
Yeah, I completely agree. So this one's interesting. Waddle, Sutton, or Nico. So with Stroud out, we saw when Davis Mills went into the game last week against the Broncos, he kind of peppered Nico Collins. And me personally, as a Nico Collins manager in a couple leagues, I was a little happy because we just seen he has not been getting the same usage he saw in the early part of last year. But I believe he hit double-digit targets last week. Now with Mills expected to be in at quarterback this week in a good matchup against the Jags, where I believe he went for 22 against them in week 3. Me personally, I'm leaning Nico Collins over Sutton and Waddle, but I do think it's closer than the start sit tool may show between Sutton and Collins, but I'm still going Collins. What do you think?
Yeah, I am also a Collins manager in one of my leagues, and I'm going to go Nico Collins. I think kind of what you just said, the Davis Mills part, I think it's interesting sometimes where people get a little worried whenever backups come in about like, how is this going to affect my players? But if your player is a top 10 at their position, I think that having a backup elevates that player. And the reason is because they typically lean on their best players a little bit more, because I don't want to say they're less talented at the game of football, but there's a reason they're the backup quarterback and not the starter. They have a tougher time threading the needle in some of these plays, throwing into tight windows. So they're going to lean on their guys who are more skillful and can convert these targets to points. And so Nico Collins is one of those guys. He didn't have a touchdown last week, but he still put up a solid score just on catches and yards. And so I think it's going to be a lot of like checkdowns to Nico Collins. I think he could average 9-10 yards per catch, which isn't that high for a receiver, but I think he could have 10 catches this weekend. So and like you said earlier as well, with his points against Jacksonville, it's another divisional game. I think for sure Nico Collins is a must start this week.
I agree. And then this was the guy who was asking between Gadsden or Bowers just a second ago. He said, thanks. Yep. Got a God squad. Diggs in the flex. So you should 100% be benching Diggs in the flex and then put one of Gatson or Bowers in the flex. This is what I would do. Just a quick tip for you guys. Never put players who are playing on Thursday Night Football in the flex spot. You want to put them in the actual specific position they're playing. So Bowers, for example, put Bowers in the tight end spot. Let's say Troy Franklin or Cortland Sutton, put them in the wide receiver spot, because if you leave them in the flex, then let's say an injury happens. Like I know, what was it, 2 weeks ago, Drake London, completely healthy going into the weekend. And then Saturday morning, I get a notification Drake London's questionable. A couple hours later, he's not expected to play. And I had him in my flex, so then I was able to switch it out. But if I didn't have him in my flex because I had someone play it on Thursday night, I only would be able to switch him out for a receiver. So make sure you guys are doing that. Don't have your Thursday night players in the flex spot.
Yeah, 100%. That's my biggest tip for any like new fantasy football players is to do that. And I think that's exactly true as well. I would put Gadsden in over Diggs. The thing with the Patriots for me is they have a handful of decently talented receivers, Booty, Demario Douglas, and Stephon Diggs. But I think it's a lot less predictable who's going to be getting the rock more so between those three. Any given game, when Gadsden is so safe over the last 4 weeks, I think you have to start him over Diggs.
100%. So this guy, I've seen him ask this a ton. I got Nix. How are we feeling? I like Nix this week. I mean, I don't know who your other options are, but Bo Nix has been the QB7 overall, and over the last couple weeks, I think he's been easily a top three quarterback. He put up 40, 25, and then 20. I like Bo Nix a lot this week. It's just about game script. We want this game. If you're starting Bo Nix, you want this game to stay semi-close, because you don't want to blow out by the second half and then they're just running the ball a ton.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think Bo Nix has a pretty solid game today. He's definitely inside the top 10, maybe just in or outside the top 5 for me this week. He's just been so electric the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and like we were saying earlier, he is literally the captain of this team. They are going to need him to have a good game without PS2 as well. They're going to need him to have a good game to bring this one home in the divisional matchup. So I was waiting for a Trey Tucker question because we were talking about it before the stream. Trey Tucker is such an interesting situation. He has one of the highest snap shares for any wide receiver in the league so far. They now lose their wide receiver one. I know their wide receiver one is really Bowers, but they lose their wide receiver one on the depth chart, Jacoby Myers. I'm actually making a pretty tough start-sit decision in one of my leagues between Trey Tucker and Troy Franklin. I don't know if I'm going to be able to change it before the game starts. I think I have Troy Franklin in right now, but I'm interested. What do you think between Keenan, QJ, Trey Tucker, Charbonnet, and Kamara? This one is tough for me.
He has a lot of guys there. You need to sit one. I think it makes the question a little bit easier. Honestly, I'd probably sit Kamara out of that lot just because he didn't take back over that offense as much as I think a lot of us thought he did whenever Kendra Miller did go out with his tear and is going to be out for the season. Tyler Shaw going in at QB as well, I think just kind of brings that offense down a peg. And I understand why they do it. They're out of the playoff contention at this point, and they want to see if they got a guy in Tyler Shaw. So they're going to let him probably ride it out the rest of the year. But I'm not putting Kamara in my starting lineups most weeks this year. Unless he gets bailed out by a touchdown, I don't see him putting up that many points. Charbonnet gets a lot of red zone usage, which gets him the upside. We were just talking about Trey Tucker. I think he's certainly got more upside than Kamara now that he is the legitimate wide receiver one of the only, targets for that team outside of Bowers. There's a couple other young receivers as well, but and Keenan and QJ are a little interesting to me as well. That Chargers wide receiver core in general is interesting because they spread the ball around so much. They've got 4 really high level fantasy receivers, I'll call it. They got Ladd, Keenan, QJ, and Gadsden. And that's if Vidal / Hampton / Najee Harris, whoever the running back is not getting targets as well, which they do. So it's tough between those guys to know each week who to start. It's kind of like I was talking about the Patriots earlier, where there's just such a split between the wide receivers. But I think that, like I was talking about earlier with Gadsden, I think the game script for that Steelers-Chargers game this weekend commands a lot of passes from the Chargers and a lot of spreading the ball around. So I'm pretty comfortable starting all of those Chargers players, in my flex spots over a lot of other guys in similar tiers.
Yeah, 100%. So this question is interesting to me. Sutton or Pittman? I'm interested to see where the Walter Picks app has him. So the Walter Picks app actually has Sutton higher than Pittman this week, just because the Falcons have actually been really good against receivers this year. Most weeks I would easily say Pittman. He's been the clear number one option in this passing attack. I'm still, I don't know, something's telling me I'm leaning Pittman still, just because I think he has the much safer floor. And we've talked about it a lot this live. It's all based on your matchup. If you need the higher ceiling, I do think Courtland Sutton offers a slightly higher ceiling just because of the touchdown upside. But I think Pittman has such a safe floor in this offense. Even with the tough matchup, it's going to be a close game between the Falcons. I'm personally going Pittman. What do you think, Ethan?
I think I agree with the floor versus ceiling, but honestly, I think I would lead Sutton, and here's my reason for it. You said that Atlanta's been really good this year against the passing attack, which is true, and I agree with it. But I think what's equally as important as that is they've been very weak against the run, and when they have a guy like Jonathan Taylor back there, I think they will be able to get enough done with him in terms of just scoring points and keeping that offense in the game. That they won't need to. So a lot of times you'll look at these matchups and look at the defensive rankings. Like the Rams and the Broncos are two examples where they're good against the run game and the passing game. And so it doesn't necessarily affect my decisions as much because both receiving core and the running back core is being affected equally by a tough matchup. But this is one of those rare instances where I feel like it's not necessarily the case because I think the Falcons are allow the 8th most points to running backs so far this year in fantasy, and then they allow the 7th least to wide receivers. So I would probably go Sutton just for that reason. And if they didn't have Jonathan Taylor, I wouldn't say that. But because they have arguably the best running back in the league at the moment, but definitely a top 3, I feel like they're going to be able to get plenty done with him, that they're not going to have to lean on Pittman as much as they maybe have been in previous games.
I actually really like that take. I didn't even factor that in looking at how the Falcons have been. And I knew the Falcons have not been great against running backs, but I didn't think about that in the moment. Now that you mentioned that, I actually would go Sutton. I like that take a lot. And great analysis. I'll let you start this one. I'm interested to see what you think between Sutton or
Odunze. Man, this is tough. There's a couple players every week and every year that are really tough to grade, and Odunze feels like one of those for me because like Emeka Egbuka started off the season really hot. Top 5 rest of the season upside. We were seeing it from him, and then both Odunze and Emeka Egbuka kind of fell off a little bit, it feels like. And I hate to use that term because Emeka got injured, but Odunze's coming off of a 0-point week against a team where they pass the ball more than they probably will any other game this week. And so that's, a little bit of my concern with him. And then like you have pulled up right now, he's got the injury as well that he's dealing with. So personally, I would go Sutton just for the security. I feel like the combination of the injury and also the bust potential of Rome Odunze, where they've shown they can score, 50 points a game without him. They definitely need him. I think he's definitely the best receiver on that team, but they showed last week they don't need him to score 50 points. And so that makes me a little bit more concerned about him going forward. I still think he has a lot of upside to be a decent receiver the rest of the year, but between that and the injury, I would go with Sutton this week.
Yeah, I completely agree. Odunze, you should not be selling low on him in any way. Like, hold Odunze if you have him. I do think there's better days ahead, but I mean, I agree with what you said. They just showed they could put up 47 points now with Colston Loveland finally breaking out. They have a lot of options as passing attack. I don't know, what is Luther Burden's status this week? Is Luther Burden expected back? But even if Burden isn't there, we've seen Zacchaeus step up in a big way so Burden is expected to play. Yeah, so they have Burden, they have Zacchaeus, they still have more. I think you have to go Sutton. It's a good matchup against the Raiders. And if I could pick any player to get in the end zone tonight, I'm probably going Sutton. I think he's going to absolutely dominate this Raiders secondary. So I'm pretty comfortably going Sutton there. What do you do you see a question you like?
Let's see. So I've got pull this one up real quick. Franklin, Pierce, or Slayton. Slayton's an interesting one because this Giants team, I think, is one of the funnest teams to talk about this year because of what feels like it's been such a big up and down roller coaster ride with the injuries, with the wins against good teams, the losses against bad teams. They're really tough to predict every week. Slayton's coming off a pretty decent game. That Colts passing attack has been pretty effective this year, spreading the ball around. Pittman's been great, but also Alec Pierce, Josh Downs, Edie Mitchell even had a couple of good games before he got traded. And then kind of the same thing with Troy Franklin, where he's had his ups and downs. So personally, I'm going to go ahead and eliminate Alec Pierce. We talked about Michael Pittman a little bit earlier. I think it's going to be double on Alec Pierce in terms of the tough defensive matchup. I think that if they do pass the ball much, it's going to have to go to guys like Pittman that are good in the contested catch and can get good yardage and man coverage, which I think he's going to be a little better at than Alec Pierce. But between Slayton and Troy Franklin, I'm going to go Troy Franklin, and that is a little bit closer than maybe it would be other weeks. I think that the Giants have a decent passing attack against the Chicago Bears this week, but I think that they're going to be a little more reliant on the run game, and maybe as a ratio than they have in the last couple of weeks. And Troy Franklin, I think, has a lot of upside with it being Thursday night, it being divisional. Good defensive matchup. Raiders are fourth most points allowed to wide receivers. He's kind of taken over. Before the season started, I was pretty big on Marvin Mims as being like a potential breakout wide receiver too. He ended last season with a couple of 20-point games, but Troy Franklin has stepped into that role quite nicely this year. I'm excited to see what he's going to do tonight, and I think he's probably a start over Slayton and Pierce.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's hard to not start Troy Franklin over these guys when Troy Franklin is leading the Broncos in target share so far this season. I mean, maybe it's that college connection, but Troy Franklin has been getting targeted a ton. He's averaging 11 fantasy points per game this year. I'm pretty comfortably going Franklin. I do agree. I think Slayton is kind of a sleeper start this week, but I'm pretty comfortably going Franklin. And then this one piqued my interest. Dobbins or Swift? Pretty comfortably actually going Swift. Dobbins hasn't been great over the last couple weeks just because he's pretty much lost his entire receiving role to RJ Harvey. We've seen RJ Harvey snap share climb just a bit over the last couple weeks. Dobbins, the only way I see him having a 15 plus fantasy point game is if the Broncos get up early and often, or let's say Dobbins finds the end zone twice, which definitely could happen. But I think Swift has the better chance to have a good day with Manungai banged up, with Swift already being back to full practice on Thursday, and in a great matchup against the Giants. I'm interested, though. What do you think, Ethan?
Yeah, I agree, especially when you factor in the Kyle Manungai injury. Swift has been, kind of just getting better and better as season has rolled on. And I think just generally the Bears have, and the run game of the Bears has. And so I think there's a lot of things for that Bears team that are working right now. And I think Swift is more likely to play than Manungai. It's just based on the injury reports I've been reading. So I do like Swift this week, or Manungai. If it's one of those two, either one I think is a great start. And if they're both playing, but especially over Dobbins, I think that tonight is going to be a good opportunity to use RJ Harvey if they do get to a point where they're leaning on the run game. So I'm going to go a Swift on that one. But one thing I'll say as well, as we get closer to game time, we're 15 minutes out. So for anyone who does need to make last minute start sit decisions, make sure you do it on the Walter Picks app. I know a lot of you already have it, but for those who don't, the projections on the app are more accurate than every platform that we play on: ESPN, Sleeper, Yahoo, and CBS. So definitely check that out. There's a free trial that we're doing right now if you use code EH or Lion whenever you sign up. And you can plug all of your start sit questions into this app, and you'll get the best answer you can on who you should start and sit. So make sure you do that before game time, because once the clock strikes at 8:20 and this game starts, you won't be able to make any more adjustments. So make sure you get your lineup set proper. Yeah,
and guys, I just want you to remember that football season is I might be getting the time wrong, but it's around 4 to 4.5 months out of the year, guys. So this opportunity really only comes once. You lose a couple of these really important weeks to make the playoffs, you're done, and you have to wait till next September. So I would be taking any edge you can get, and you can try it out literally for free. You can try out the start sit tool. We have a new trade finder. I'll pop that up really quick that you can try out to help you make league winning trades before your season is in the dust. So I highly recommend you try it out. And then I think what we should do, Ethan, since we are less than 15 minutes out from game time, I say we just rapid fire pop questions up. We say who we're going out of the two, so we can just answer as many of your guys' questions as we can before game time.
Yeah, so, and real quick beforehand, just for those on the TikTok live, we are live on YouTube on the Walter Picks channel. That's where we're answering all start sit questions. So if you have any last minute ones before the game tonight, jump on the YouTube live, drop your comment saying we're going to be rapid firing and getting everyone's questions answered before we hit play tonight.
Yeah, boys, come to the YouTube live on the Walter Picks main account. Hit the live, start commenting your rapid fire questions. That's where we're answering them all. All right, let's pop them up. Looking for one that I like. Ooh, RJ Harvey, DJ Moore, pretty comfortably going DJ Moore here. He finally had his breakout game last week. He's been underwhelming this year. Good matchup against the Giants. I'm going DJ Moore.
Yeah, I'm going to ditto that as well, especially with the good defensive matchup.
All right, let's see. Harvey or Aaron Jones? This one is interesting to me. I don't know Aaron Jones' status. I'm leaning Harvey, though, just because I know Jones is questionable and his snap share isn't great. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's tough. It's one of those, once again, Thursday versus Sunday night games. I think Aaron Jones has a very high ceiling against the Baltimore Ravens defense, but I would probably lean Harvey just because of the injury. He was already on IR for a few weeks this year. And I think with the odds of him being out this game, especially when they have a good backup like Mason, I think Harvey's a safer answer.
I'll let you start this one. This one's interesting while I'm pulling up the rankings. What do you
Yeah,
think?
Genty or Vidal? I'm gonna go Genty. We talked about him in depth a little bit earlier in the live, but Vidal's got a very tough matchup. He's coming off a bad game. I think they're gonna be passing a lot more in that Chargers Steelers game than running. And Genty, I think, has a lot of things, a lot of non-statisticals going for him tonight. With it being Thursday night, it's a divisional matchup. Um, the Broncos defense losing Pastor Tane. I think the Raiders in general are going to be better on offense. They're going to be able to pass the ball better, which is going to be able to open up the running game for Ashton Genty. So I'm going Genty over Vidal.
Yeah, I don't think this one needs much of an explanation, guys. I think you should go Genty, even in the bad matchup. We know he's the more talented running back than Vidal. I'm going Genty. This one, Dobbins or Quentin Johnston. Me personally, I'm going Dobbins. It is a solid matchup against the Raiders. And I think there is a chance that this game gets out of hand early. The Broncos get up, and we could see Dobbins getting 20-plus carries just because he gets a ton of usage in the second half. Quentin Johnston, I think he doesn't have that safe floor with Gatson now breaking out. I'm going Dobbins.
Yeah, I'm going to say the same thing. I think QJ definitely has a higher ceiling. We've seen it earlier this season where he can be the guy that gets 2 touchdowns per game, but Dobbins is going to get a nice, secure floor of carries. Like Quentin Johnston's just not going to get in targets.
I'll let you pick one that is piquing your interest.
I like this one, man. Goff or Dart? I think this one's pretty easy for me. It's definitely Jackson Dart. He's one of my favorite quarterbacks for the rest of the season, especially in the playoffs. And even with the injuries to that team, he's playing out of his mind. And we talked about Goff earlier. I think the matchup being so favorable might work to his detriment because I think that the Commanders are so banged up that Goff may not need to do much work to get that win. So I don't see Goff playing all that well this week in terms of a fantasy perspective, and I think Dart certainly does.
I agree. I think this is pretty easy. It's easily Dart here. Okay, this one, Tracy or Dobbins, and then Sutton or DJ Moore. So last week we saw, when everyone thought Tracy was the number one waiver ad with Scatterbo hurt, everyone thought Tracy was about to be a borderline top 15 to 18 running back rest of the year. But we saw he was outplayed by Singletary. He was outsnapped by Singletary. Singletary looked like the better back. For that reason, I'm going Dobbins. I'd probably be going Dobbins even if Tracy got more of the work than Singletary last week. And then between Sutton or DJ Moore, I'm going Sutton. So if I were you, I would go in on both of the Broncos, Sutton and Dobbins.
Yeah, I agree on both of those. Tracy was very disappointing with his rush there last week, and then I think Sutton is more safe than DJ Moore as well.
For this one, Genty, Myers, Moore, Pearsall, pretty comfortably going Genty.
Yeah, I think I have to. Pearsall's got the injury. Jacoby Myers has been battling an injury all year long. And then DJ Moore, I feel like it needs a couple more weeks for me to want to say he's safe. And I think Genty is safe.
Ooh, this one is too good to pass up on. I saw Olave or Franklin. Now, a couple weeks ago, when Rattler was still in, I'd easily be saying Olave. But you can see on the Walter Picks app, guys. And by the way, make sure if you're in the chat right now and you don't have the Walter Picks app installed, for free with either code EH or Lion. Both of them get you the free trial, so you can literally look at the weekly rankings every single week. You'll see Olave's down at the wide receiver 35 because of Shuck now in, and this offense just looks terrible. I'm going Troy Franklin. Hate me, but I'm going Troy Franklin.
Yeah, I'm saying the same thing, and it's really upsetting because I was pretty big on Olave after week, let's say 4 or 5 on a buy Olave, but between Rattler getting benched and the tough matchup this week, I'm not playing Olave.
I'll let you start this one.
Franklin or Monungai PPR. So I'm going to go Franklin here. Now, I think that Monungai certainly has a higher upside, but he is battling an injury this week. And so there is a chance that he doesn't play. And so I always go with the security whenever, at least that's just my preference of fantasy football. If you, let's say you're 3-6 and you have to win this week, maybe Monungai's upside is worth it. But I think Troy Franklin certainly has a much, much higher floor with the potential for Monungai to just not play. So I'd go Troy Franklin.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I completely agree. If you really need the win, maybe take the risk with Monungai, but he might not play this week. And we know Franklin's playing. We know Troy Franklin has been leading the team in targets over the last 4 weeks. I'm going Franklin. Let's see. Marvin Harrison or Franklin is an interesting one. On that note, I'm probably going Marvin Harrison. He's kind of been brought to life last week with Jacoby Brissett in. Now we know Brissett is starting. It's not a great matchup, but it's hard for me to not start Marv after the game he had last week. What do you think?
Yeah, after his game last week, I think Brissett being in for the rest of the year elevates every one of that of the Cardinals skills players when it comes to a fantasy perspective. So I'm definitely starting Marvin Harrison this week. It's one of those things too where the defensive matchup is tough, but it's divisional, and divisional matchups are always, you can't look at stats quite as much and take those into account when you're looking at divisional matchups. And I've had someone ask me before why that is the case, so I'll go on to like a quick 30-second tangent. So the NFL schedules every year are different. You don't know which divisions you're going to be playing, which teams you're going to be playing. But what is constant is you play your divisional opponents twice a year, every year. So you're always going to prepare and watch more film and stuff like that for the divisional opponents that you have. So a tough matchup against a defense that maybe has been playing well may not be quite as impactful because the Cardinals have prepared for the Seahawks a lot more than they have for every other opponent they face this season. So I like Marvin Harrison even with the tough matchup.
100%. And then this one piqued my interest. Pick two at flex, Garrett Wilson. He put the hurt. I like that you put that. We do know Garrett Wilson is coming back from the hyperextended knee. Aaron Jones, hurt, Franklin, and then Vidal. Me personally, I am going to say go Franklin out of that. I think he has a decent safe floor with the target share he's been seeing, a good matchup against the Raiders. And then I think you have to take the risk and go Garrett Wilson. If he doesn't play, then I would go Vidal. But I think you have to take the risk with Garrett Wilson because if he does play, unless it comes out that he's on a snap count or anything like that, then Garrett Wilson is a locked-in top 13 to 14 wide receiver coming off the injury. So I think you go Wilson and Franklin. But what do you think, Ethan?
Yeah, I agree. And the nice part about that Jets matchup is if Garrett Wilson ends up not playing, you'll know it in time to throw Vidal in instead. So I think that's probably the best answer is go Franklin and Wilson.
Oh, shoot. There we go. Got it up. What do you think about this one? This one's interesting.
Knicks or Darnold? So Darnold has been lighting them up this year. I really am a big Darnold fan, but I'm going to go Bo Nix, man. Like, as much as I think they've both been super impressive this year, Bo Nix has been even more impressive, man. We talked earlier about his statistics, especially in the last few games. And especially one thing that I love about Bo Nix is that comeback against the Giants showed how good he is at being clutch. Whenever they need to get points and need to win a game, Bo Nix is the type of guy that can get it done. So I like him a little bit better than Sam Darnold this week for that reason.
I agree. I just think Bo Nix has exponentially more rushing upside. And I think we're getting a slight recency bias with Darnold where like before last week where he dropped 28, he only had 2 other games over 20 points. He had multiple games under 10 points. I think you got to go Bo Nix. He's been consistent over the last 3 weeks. And like we've been mentioning over and over again in this live, call it glaze, but Bo Nix is the captain of this team and he has to have a good day to beat the Raiders. So I'm going Bo Nix.
The Seahawks team just gets more rushing touchdowns as a ratio of their total touchdowns than the Broncos do as well. That's why Sam Darnold's points are so low. He gets a lot of yards, but the passing touchdowns aren't there.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, this one, JK or Diggs, Hurts or Dart. I'm just going to give you the names. I think JK over Diggs pretty comfortably, and then I think you still have to go Hurts just because of the touch push, how safe the floor is. I mean, Jalen Hurts, I would say, is the only quarterback in the NFL that can have 100 passing yards and still give you 25 fantasy points. So I think you have to go Hurts.
Yeah, and you know, you have it pulled up right there. They're one spot apart on the Walter Picks rankings app. I agree. I've got to go Jalen Hurts here. That Green Bay Packers defense has been good this year, but I think that the amount of talent on that Eagles team certainly gives Jalen Hurts a nice floor with the tush push and rushing upside. And then I'm going to also go J.K. Dobbins over Diggs.
I'll let you pick a question that's piquing your interest.
I like this one, man. I like talking about the Buccaneers. Rachaad White or Kyle Monangai. I'm going to go Rachaad White, but both of these guys potentially may not play. Monangai's dealing with an injury. We don't know what's happening with Bucky Irving yet. The data that I've been seeing the last couple of days suggests Bucky Irving might not actually come back this week. Rachaad White might still be the lead back. And if that is the case, I like Rachaad White maybe a little bit better. I like his receiving upside. Monangai's going to be splitting carries with DeAndre Swift if he does play, but I think Monangai might be leaning towards not playing. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, this will come down to injuries. I think there's going to be one guy who's playing without competition and one guy who is.
Yeah, I think it's pretty comfortably Rachaad White no matter the outcome. I think even if Monangai plays, even if Bucky Irving plays, I still think Rachaad White will have a role. Bucky Irving's coming back from a shoulder and is it a foot or ankle injury as well? Yeah. So coming back from multiple injuries, I think it'd be a little foolish to think he's all of a sudden just going to get his full workload back. Pretty comfortably, no matter the outcome, I would say you should go Rachaad White. And then I see this one. This one's interesting. Very interesting. Parker Washington, Josh Downs, or Aaron Jones. So a couple days ago, I would have told you Parker Washington pretty easily. And then I saw something come out that Jacoby Myers is going to play this week. It's his birthday, I guess. He wants to play on his birthday, first game. So Parker Washington, I am going to say I'm going to eliminate him. And then Aaron Jones is questionable. He hasn't had a big workload. He's still coming back from the injury that put him on the IR. I'm going Josh Downs, who's been actually really, I want to pull up Josh Downs' game log here really quick. We have him as a wide receiver 42, which I actually think is a little bit too low. Over the last, until he dropped to 0 because he did not play, over the last 4 weeks that he has played, he's averaging over 13.5 fantasy points per game, not a single game under 11 fantasy points. He's kind of carved out that role as the slot guy in this offense. So for that reason, I'm going Downs. What do you think, though?
Yeah, I like Downs compared to some of the other Colts receivers, maybe a little bit more this week. But Parker Washington is interesting to me because Jacoby Myers is there, and it sounds like he's going to play. But one thing to consider as well is he's brand new to this team, so we don't know, how much of the offense he knows quite yet. And so I'm still interested to see what kind of role Parker Washington gets. But I think Josh Downs is probably the safe answer this week just because Jacoby Myers, he's obviously a very smart guy to have made it in as many years in the NFL as he has. So, I think there's a good chance that Parker Washington ends up getting a little bit less volume than he has in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and this is an interesting storyline. BTJ not at practice yesterday. So BTJ is actually trending towards not playing with that low-grade ankle sprain he has. If BTJ doesn't play, I do think you have to start Parker Washington because it'll be the Parker Washington and Jacoby Myers show. But it's a close one between Downs and Washington.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, BTJ is a guy where he's not getting a lot of points in fantasy, but he is taking a lot of targets from the team, which is just detrimental to the other guy. So if he doesn't play, then absolutely Parker Washington's a start.
I'll let you start this one while I'm putting up the start-sit tool here. This is interesting.
Yeah, start 2, Troy Franklin, Kittle, and Gadsden. So we talked about Gadsden earlier. I'm a big Gadsden glazer, I will admit, but Gadsden is for sure a start. For me, I think he's the best one on that list. And then number 2, I think I might go George Kittle, man. I know on paper it's a tough defensive matchup, but it's another divisional one that has big playoff implications. And so, like I said earlier, divisional matchups don't rely so much on stats for how you can grade a player's potential performance. And Kittle is one of the best tight ends in the league. And so I think that he's probably worth a safe start over Troy Franklin, in my opinion. But that one's a little bit close. Gadsden for me is a must start. Kittle ekes it out over Troy Franklin for me.
This one is really tough for me. I do agree Gadsden must start. It's just Kittle has not been seeing the targets with Mac Jones. Tough matchup against the Rams. If there's any week to do it, I think it's this week. Go Franklin. But oh man, that's tough. My gut's telling me Kittle. I mean, it's George Kittle. We know what he brings. I think you have to go Gadsden and Kittle and then sit Franklin tonight. And maybe it bites you in the butt, but you still have George Kittle in. So it's not too bad. But yeah, how much time do we got until the game starts? Or did the game just kick off?
It did. It just kicked off. We are at 1 minute past. So I think it is about time we wrap it up.
All right. Well, I appreciate everyone for hopping in. And thanks for having me on, Ethan. This was a blast, man.
Yeah, of course, man. Hopefully we get to do this a couple more times before the end of the season, man. It was great. I'm glad we get to answer some start-sit questions and hopefully help everyone win some weeks.
For sure. And I appreciate everyone hopping in. This was one of me and Ethan's first YouTube lives. Hopefully we didn't do too bad, but I mean, it's just anytime you're talking ball with the homies, it's fun. So I mean, I had a blast. I forgot the camera was on, to be honest, but yeah, I don't know how to end this thing.
I got you. But yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. And hopefully Shay and I will see you soon. Have a great night, everyone.
Peace.